Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is sponsored by Avalara. They breathe compliance so that you don't have to. And we have two of their experts with us here today to talk about the state of beverage alcohol compliance. They have a lot of interesting survey data from wineries, distilleries, and breweries, showing how they are navigating the compliance challenges they face in the current market. Now, before we jump into the webinar, a couple of notes here. This webinar is pre-recorded, but the experts are watching live alongside you. So if you have any questions along the way, just pop them into the live chat and they'll answer them as we move along. Now, without further ado, let me pass it on over to Sarah and Shannon.
Thank you so much. Today, we're going to talk about the current state of beverage alcohol compliance. We're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to tell you a little bit about the Avalara and Potentiate study that occurred in 2021. And then we're going to take a deeper dive into what beverage alcohol businesses are doing, where they're selling, many of the compliance challenges and issues that beverage alcohol businesses face, how much time and money is spent addressing these issues, as well as their goals and barriers to achieving those goals, and how technology and automation can help beverage alcohol businesses achieve their goals. My name is Shannon. I've worked for Avalara for about 4.5 years. I used to be on the return side of things, filing the returns, and now I'm a tax research analyst. So what I do is I research and keep up with regulatory changes, legislative changes, form changes, basically any changes that are occurring in the industry that may impact compliance for our clients, wineries, breweries, and distilleries, shipping here in the US. Sarah.
Thank you, Shannon. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Faria, Director of our Tax Compliance Services at Avalara. I actually came to Avalara 11 years ago from the public accounting industry, and that's where I really developed my love for excellent customer experience, as well as the drive for accuracy and efficiency. It's a different world when you come over to sales tax, so it's been a fun ride. I live here in Sacramento, California, where I really love it. Being born and raised in the San Diego, California bubble, it's interesting to how a couple hours away you can be in the mountains and the beaches in such a quick amount of time. So I love it, and I love living up here and being so close to wine country as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get started. So at Avalara, we are all about tax compliance. We do the hard stuff so you don't have to. We are so passionate about simplifying tax compliance that our motto is simply tax compliance done right, and we believe in it. Especially in the beverage alcohol industry, license and registration requirements, as well as filing requirements, are complex and constantly changing, as most of you know. Our number one priority is making sure that your license, registration, filing requirements are processed accurately and timely, so you don't have to worry about it, and you can do what you do best, which is run your business. On this next slide, you'll see Avalara, we decided to conduct this study to get even a deeper understanding. Our primary objective of this research is really to better understand the attitudes and behaviors and usage trends among the beverage alcohol producers and suppliers relative to alcohol tax and regulatory compliance. The overall goals really are to identify methods used for tax management tools, resources used to understand dynamics related to the purchase process, decision makers and influencers and triggers, to identify overall goals of compliance and related concerns and barriers, to measure appeal and interest in beverage alcohol compliance concepts and features, to gauge price expectations, the whole 9 yards, capture key demographics, and compare results across key segments within the target market. So we could use this data to really understand who our audience is and who we really need to improve for. That said, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon, who's going to discuss this current state of the beverage alcohol tax compliance.
Absolutely. So what does beverage alcohol compliance look like right now? We're going to focus mostly on wine for a little bit and then evaluate the industry kind of as a whole. So US wine sales back in 2021, when that Potentiate study was done, totaled over $63 billion, closer to 64. So it's a huge industry, a lot of revenue. And what's driving this industry? What trends are we seeing? Well, it depends who you ask. Some researchers are predicting that the industry is going to grow almost 7% annually due to millennials and young drinkers. But other analysts aren't so sure. They think that maybe the growth is more in the older segment of consumers 60 years old or older, indicating that younger drinkers, younger consumers are a little bit less interested in wine. So we've seen this industry change a lot over the last few years. It changes all the time, but that was made even more so by the pandemic back in 2020 and 2021, right when this study was being done. And obviously, direct-to-consumer shipping at that time played a huge role in allowing consumers access to their favorite wines. Revenue from US online wine sales rose 28% to almost $15 billion in 2021. That's a big jump in just 1 year. It was projected that by 2027, it's going to grow an additional $4 billion. Now, this makes sense if you think about it. During the pandemic, we saw, drinks to go, curbside pickup, delivered alcohol all the time. People couldn't go to their favorite wineries, so of course they're going to have to get it delivered to them. They also didn't want to go to the liquor store. So it really it showed how convenient direct-to-consumer shipping is, and it also even led to a couple states opening for direct-to-consumer wine shipping. So compliance challenges go hand in hand with growth, right? The bigger your market gets, the bigger your industry gets, the more opportunities you have, the more responsibilities you have to go with those. As you get more products and more licenses and you're selling into new places, you're going to have more licensing requirements, more returns requirements, more products to register, and even more government regulations that you have to pay attention to. So these are some things to keep in mind as we talk about growth and as we talk about your growing business. Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you for where businesses are selling.
Absolutely. So physical locations, actually retail locations, continue to be the highest selling channel used by beverage alcohol businesses. But online platforms, as Shannon mentioned, are increasingly they play an important role now, and especially effective. We saw such an uptick during the pandemic with online sales. This survey actually found that 82% of businesses that participated sell on their own website. Like, that's pretty huge when you think about how many wineries are not necessarily, in the large category. It also found that 30% use other e-commerce platforms and a third sell on marketplaces. My baby here at Avalara is filing the sales tax returns. Since the marketplace explosion, I am a huge, is one of my main topics and main excitements here. And just to give you a little example, a marketplace is actually a physical or electronic place where tangible personal property, digital products, or services are offered for sale. Think of the giants like Amazon and Etsy, for example. The number of third-party marketplaces operating globally has actually grown by 500% since 2007. They are increasingly specific to products, services, or clientele. So many are on products and others are on wineries, as you know it today. And they have their own implications when it comes to regulatory compliance. So what does this mean for your business? You could still have a requirement to register and file in a state, even if you sell solely on a marketplace. So it's pretty interesting. Wineries can also ship direct to consumer in most states. Only Mississippi and Utah ban all DTC shipping. Happen to know that personally because I lived in Utah for about 6 years. Out-of-state breweries can ship to consumers in 10 states, plus Washington, D.C., and out-of-state distilleries can ship into just 6 states in Washington, D.C. So next up, we're going to talk about the key challenges that businesses face, which, like I said, sales tax is my baby here. My team, I've been managing filing sales tax teams for going on 15 years now. So pretty exciting stuff for me. Top challenges for managing sales and use tax. All sectors indicated they have a hard time keeping track of changing state and local rates. That's not a big surprise. Wineries and retailers who sell off premises most likely to voice this as their top pain point. I hear you. Businesses also said filing sales tax returns with the appropriate state and local jurisdictions was a major challenge, especially with the direct-to-consumer increase that happened where the requirement for sales and use tax returns across all jurisdictions became evident. Distilleries and wineries were most likely to report obstacles around knowing where they should register for sales tax permits. They can sell into less states. In addition, 37% of all businesses said they have difficulties keeping track of product exemptions and customer exemptions. None of this is super surprising, as this is what we do every day here at Avalara to make it easy on our customers. On the next slide, you'll see the survey also asked businesses to identify the top compliance challenges specific to the beverage alcohol industry. So take everything with sales and use tax and quadruple that. Complying with direct-to-consumer shipping regulations and adhering to regulations related to trade and marketing practices tied for first place. 45% of all respondents, you can see, called these out as compliance challenges. More than half of retailers that sell off premises and 46% of wineries mentioned registering, revising, and renewing product registrations as a tough area as well. Other concerns included knowing the proper alcohol rates to charge. Also not a surprise, it varies in every state. It is so complex and hard to manage if you are really looking to sell in all US states. Renewing licenses and bonds and knowing when and how to get licensed is really key. And also not a surprise. Next up, I think, Shannon, you're going to cover how businesses manage compliance.
I sure am. So businesses all handle their compliance just like every other part of their businesses differently, right? Everybody's unique. But there's a few different categories that we see people handling their compliance within. So the first and largest group handles their compliance internally with an accounting or finance department. It's about 45%, and it's even higher at 57% for breweries. And then the next sector is at 28%. They have their own designated tax department. So beyond just an accountant or an accounting department, they have designated tax filing people filing their sales tax, their excise tax, things like that. That's their whole job. About 28% of beverage alcohol businesses have something like that. And that number at 31% is even higher for wineries. And about 27% actually outsource to a third party, such as Avalara. And that number is the highest for distilleries at 28%. So if you're handling these things yourself, right? If you're handling them, whether it's through an accounting department or a finance department or a tax department or just your accountant, it takes time, right? It takes time. And as we all have heard, time is money. So we're going to look at how much time this takes per week. So the first category is licensing. Licensing happens, if you're wanting to enter a new market, or maybe you need to renew your licenses, and that happens, about once a year, but every license is different with when they expire and when you have to renew. But we're seeing an average of about 12 hours per week on licensing activities, a little under that. And that number is higher for wineries, which would make sense because there's more markets that they can sell into, right? The next largest chunk of time that is spent is on product registrations and renewals. These don't, kind of like licensing, you do it once and then have to renew it. But every product in a lot of cases has to be registered in a lot of different states. It's a different process. You have to manage your colas, your labels, your formulas, all of these different supporting documents that have to go with these registrations, with these renewals, different softwares that you have to go through for different states, things like that. And so we're seeing about 12 and a half hours per week spent on that, with the highest again being wine. The next amount of time spent is 13 hours on tax calculation. And as Sarah mentioned, this varies from state to state, and every state charges a little bit differently, or taxes a little bit differently, whether it's per liter or per gallon or per barrel. It just depends. And is it sparkling wine versus still wine versus hard cider? All of these different considerations for the tax rates that you're having to calculate and to use, it takes time. And then, the next step of that is filing returns. And again, like everything in the compliance industry, and especially in the alcohol industry, it varies from state to state, right? The type of return, the filing process, the data required, the calculation, it all varies. And so managing that can be really, really time consuming. And so we're seeing over 13 hours a week on average spent on that, with over 15 hours a week being spent by wineries and about 10 to 11 hours per week by breweries and distilleries. So wineries are really taking up the most time, which makes a lot of sense given that their market is a bit bigger. So, how much then is spent money-wise per month? I just mentioned time is money, right? And as an older study that was performed by Potentiate as well, didn't focus on the beverage alcohol industry, but I think it can still provide some valuable information. It really focused on enterprise businesses and small to medium businesses. And as you can see, those enterprise businesses averaged almost $12,000 a month on managing compliance, sales tax compliance, things like that, whereas small to medium businesses had a 48% increase over that, with $17,672 per month. And so now you got to think about, okay, well, this was just looking at businesses in general, right? Could be a clothing seller or, a computer vendor, something like that, any kind of business in the enterprise or small to medium business sector. And then you got to think about alcohol and how much more heavily regulated alcohol compliance is, and all of the additional requirements that go along with selling alcohol, wine, beer, or spirits, right? So you got to think that these numbers are only going to grow for the alcohol industry. They're only going to get bigger. And similarly, we're thinking the same thing with sales tax audit management. That same older Potentiate study looked at how much was spent on sales tax audit management specifically for enterprise and small to medium businesses. And it's not surprising that enterprise businesses spend far less on managing audits, whereas small to medium businesses have a 218% increase over enterprise businesses, spending $4,679 on sales tax audit management. And as I mentioned with beverage alcohol, that just grows, right? Because it's not just sales tax audits. It could be excise tax. It could be licensing. It could be your shipment compliance. Are you selling too much into a state? Things like that. And we've seen that recently in the industry, right? We've seen it with Texas ABC performing their audits a couple of years ago. So it's not unheard of for there to be sales tax audits for wineries, breweries, and distilleries, but also all of these other kinds of audits. So you have to think that those numbers are only going to grow for the beverage alcohol industry. So how do businesses manage their sales and use tax, right? What tools are they utilizing? And this is just focused on sales and use tax for wineries, breweries, and distilleries. And you can see there at 54%, automated tax software solutions are the most used. And that's something like Avatax that automatically calculates and can file your returns and all of that good stuff. And you can even see there, distilleries are quite a bit more likely to utilize an automated solution. The next largest group, they utilize a third party or they don't have a solution. They don't handle it themselves, but they have a third party such as Avalara, our beverage alcohol sector, handling their sales tax compliance. And this group is actually, it's breweries that are more likely to use this option. Then there's, tools and functionality built into already utilized softwares, and distilleries are likely to use those as well when compared to wineries and breweries. And some government websites even have their own functionality and their own automation within their online systems. And so some people just rely on that, but even those have quite a bit of manual entry and things like that. And then there's just manual tools. About 22% of businesses are using manual tools and methods to manage their sales and use tax compliance. And that is incredibly time consuming. And then 21% use a third-party consultant, and 14% have some kind of internal tool, which I would imagine are your bigger businesses, right? Businesses that are more likely to have the resources to develop something like that. And you can see that wineries are more likely to utilize an internally developed tool when compared to breweries or distilleries. Similarly, we're going to look at this, but for beverage alcohol taxes, right? So this could be excise tax, markup tax, shipment reports, things like that are beverage alcohol specific. And again, at 49%, automated tax software solutions are coming in at the top. That's the most commonly used. It's what people want to use. It's the fastest, easiest, safest. So it makes a lot of sense. And actually, distilleries, again, are the most likely to utilize an automated software solution. And again, none or handled by a third party is coming in second at 31%, and breweries at the top of that as well. And then it continues down from there. We've got existing tools built into a system, forms and functionality on government websites. These are things that are going to be more likely utilized by wineries, as our third-party consultant, manual methods as well. And then internally developed tools. Again, it's the businesses that have the resources that can actually develop these tools that are going to be able to utilize them. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sarah for beverage alcohol compliance goals and barriers.
Thanks, Shannon. So we really wanted to understand how satisfied are businesses with those methods that Shannon just previously mentioned that they are currently using. Majority of businesses surveyed are actually satisfied with the methods and solutions they are using to handle sales and use tax and beverage alcohol taxes, which is, that's pretty great. Which it's also interesting because if you move to the next slide, when businesses are asked to identify the company's primary beverage alcohol compliance goal, they most frequently reported a desire to increase efficiency and streamline systems. So are more businesses wanting to move to software such as Avatax that, that can, or outsource, is kind of the gist of this information. So in addition, you can see a portion of wineries, distilleries, and retailers that sell off-premises said their primary goal is to outsource compliance completely so teams can focus on those revenue-generating activities, which is pretty great. So moving on, overall, those surveyed reported to a high understanding of beverage alcohol compliance. Businesses said keeping up with industry regulations is their most significant barrier, understandably so, to achieving compliance goals. Retailers who sell on premises were most likely to report limited knowledge of available compliance solutions and technologies as a primary obstacle. Other factors standing in the way of beverage alcohol businesses include the lack of an overall compliance strategy or framework and limited human resources. So this is a huge, you can see it's a huge undertaking, and all of these kind of trend in the same direction where it's keeping up with regulations in the industry. Like I was speaking to you before, sales and use tax is one piece of the puzzle. You add beverage alcohol compliance to the mix, and it just astronomically changes the game with regulatory requirements and keeping up with the changes in addition to all of that. So I thought this was pretty interesting. I think moving on to the next slide, Shannon is going to cover those key compliance considerations overall.
Yeah, so when we're talking about automation or we're talking about tools that these businesses can utilize, we're talking technology, right? We are well into the technological age. So we want to be able to automate and make things as efficient as possible, but are companies actually likely to purchase these new solutions? And so this Potentiate study evaluated likeliness, and you can see there at the top, on average, about 58% of businesses are either much more likely or somewhat more likely to purchase compliance technology than they were prior to the COVID pandemic. So COVID really pushed for that automation. It really pushed for technology and efficiency. and ways that we can do things without face-to-face interaction or without manual intervention. And so we really saw that push for efficiency, that push for convenience. And we're seeing that here with the likelihood to purchase new compliance technologies. And you can actually see breweries were the highest number total for being more likely at about 65% of breweries being somewhat or much more likely to purchase new compliance technology, followed by distilleries at 60% of being more likely to purchase a compliance technology. And then finally, we've got wineries right at 50%. So, and then, off-premises retailers being more likely than on-premises retailers to consider purchasing a new compliance technology, such as Avatar. So why do people want them, right? Why do people want to look at new options and new technologies for managing their compliance? What are their top concerns? What are the things that are most important to them? As you can see, everything's important, right? Every single thing is an important consideration for beverage alcohol businesses. The top being at 84% returns. And I think, as Sarah had mentioned, it's because they're complex. It's because every state is so different. They're due so frequently, right? A lot of returns are due every single month. And sometimes they change just as frequently, right? So if they can keep up with those changes through some kind of technology, you're going to get a leg up. Similarly with tax calc, same thing. You want to make sure you're not over or undercharging your customers for sales tax. You're not collecting when you're not supposed to be collecting, or you are collecting when you are supposed to be, and you're collecting at the right rates. You're paying the right amount. All of those things are really, really important for your taxes. And then the next two most likely or most important things for beverage alcohol businesses are shipping verification and licensing at 82% for both of these businesses, or for both of these sections. So shipping verification, right? It's looking at, am I allowed to ship here? Am I shipping too much? Did I go over the volume limit? Am I making sure everyone's at least 21 years of age? Because if you're not doing any of those things, right? If you're shipping too much, you're not verifying age, or you don't have the right license, you could actually be committing a crime like a felony. And you could lose your shipping privileges, you could lose your license, you could go to court. There's all sorts of potential issues that can arise from not making sure your shipping is compliant. And associated with that is licensing. You've got to make sure you got the right licenses. Now, this is really, you're applying for a license once and it renews every year, or some cases every 2 or 3 years. So it's not surprising to me that it's lower to the bottom of the list. And same with product registrations, though that can be the more time-consuming thing because you're doing a lot of it. It's certainly probably the least amount of potential liability associated with that. Whereas, if you're not filing your returns correctly, or you're failing to get licensed correctly, you're going to have penalties, interest, fines. And you can encounter that with product registrations, though it's not as likely. And you can see there, wineries are kind of at the top of all of these categories in terms of importance, except for shipping verification. That's really on breweries, and same with product registration. So obviously these businesses think that compliance is important. Returns, licensing, registrations, verification, all of these things, they said, are extremely important. But how often are they considering or evaluating their compliance solutions to make sure that these important things are addressed correctly? The majority at 45% are looking at it every 2 to 3 years. So not that frequently. A lot can change in 2 to 3 years. Just over the last couple of years of the pandemic, we've seen 2 new states open up for direct wine shipping. We've seen a state closed for other kinds of shipping. That's Nevada. You can't ship beer or spirits there anymore. So things can change. Rates change all the time. California changes its sales tax rates, the local jurisdictions, like every quarter, some of them. It's a lot. So a lot can change in 2 to 3 years. And then, the next group is 34%. They're only evaluating every 4 to 5 years, which is even less often. And then 1%, it's seldom or never. So it's good to see that most people are evaluating at some point. And only 20% are evaluating annually, and it's mostly breweries and distilleries or retailers. Whereas at that 2 to 3 year mark, that's really kind of the sweet spot for wineries. And the 4 to 5 years is kind of that sweet spot for breweries. So I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Thanks again, Shan. So beverage alcohol industry faces an extreme amount of pressure to respond to rapidly changing regulations, such as requirements related to sustainable practices, labeling, licensing, and reporting for direct-to-consumer shippers. Businesses have a greater need than ever before to stay on top of compliance changes and automate in every area where they can. Like Shannon mentioned before, just filing the return or just understanding where you can ship and how much you can ship and all of these different regulations, understanding how to calculate the taxes, register for your licenses, keep renewing your licenses once you're registered, and then filing your returns. Every return has a different due date. Every month you have to ensure you're filing the sales tax return, the shipping report, the excise report. All of this is very time consuming. And we make it simple for you and partner with you on your compliance journey every step of the way at Avalara, so you can focus on your business. I know that's the sweet spot for our companies, and so that is what we're here for, to take on for the complex stuff. And we can do this because of our cloud-native end-to-end compliance solution that you can see here. I think on the next slide, it really goes into a little bit more detail. It's a complete compliance solution designed to meet the needs of wineries, breweries, distilleries, alcohol retailers, importers, alcohol marketplaces, and alcohol delivery businesses. Beverage Alcohol automates multi-tax, calculation, exemption, certificate management, licensing, product registration and returns preparation, reporting, and remittance. My team specializes in the returns. All of this, it takes a village, and we all do this together at Avalara. And I think it's pretty amazing. And like the survey said, a lot of companies are looking to outsource. So I think that makes sense, because people really want to spend the time doing what they do best, and that's making the wine, revenue generating activities. So we love doing this work. Not every company does. It makes sense that you just want to run your business. So with our solution, you can pinpoint tax compliance needs, integrate with existing business ecosystems, streamline sales tax calculation, exemption certificate management that I mentioned before, automate that licensing and product registration management, and then simplify returns filing, remittance, and reporting processes. That might be one of the most time-consuming pieces of the month, because it is on a monthly basis in many jurisdictions. Avalara for beverage alcohol simplifies that multi-tax calculation by efficiently assessing regulatory requirements, tax types, and multiple jurisdictions, while providing that one central location for storing beverage alcohol tax compliance information. So the bottom line is we're here to help businesses navigate these complex tax challenges. I thought the survey was pretty interesting. A lot of it made complete sense. We do have resources available, and we're going to provide them in the link in the chat. So just want to thank you for listening to us compliance tax nerds today, and we'll provide those resources like I said.
If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can put the comments in the chat or put comments below. We're happy to answer your questions if we can.